So for my media research and analysis, I researched bilingual education. It's kind of a hot topic, so I figured that there would be arguments for and against it, kind of on both sides. What I expected was that conservatives would be against and that liberals would be for, because that makes sense to me. What surprised me, though, was that there were arguments for and against on both sides, and that some news sources, especially PBS, their findings differed with their expectations. So, for example, PBS did a news story about a school district in Massachusetts that has a huge Latino population, and they actually have like a segregated school just for their Latino kids that's K-12, which I disagree with, but we'll talk about that in a minute. And up until recently, they had been doing a bilingual program wherein students learned in English for a week and then Spanish the next week, and so on and so forth. And they saw that that wasn't working, that older children didn't have the reading skills that they needed as they were leaving first through third grade, which is when children should really be learning how to read. And so they decided to switch tactics and only teach in English and put a really firm emphasis on grammar. And you could tell from the questions that the reporter was asking and kind of his tone and things like that, that the PBS reporter thought that this was a horrible idea. Like he would say things like, oh, but you don't have any emphasis for children these age on social studies or math or science. And they had a guy from their Board of Education who would talk time and time again about grammar doesn't mean anything to small children. It really is only meaningful for adults. So there's no meaning connected to what they're learning. Foreign language speakers have to be able to connect what they know with what they're learning. You have to start from what your students know, things like that. And yet the evidence was that this was actually working better than what they've been doing before. And of course, PBS threw in a jab about, well, we found out that from a recent state audit that it actually wasn't working because they were bending their procedures on classroom sizes and teacher education and things like that, not with the program itself. So still trying to say bilingual education would have been better. And yet the superintendent for the school is like, sorry guys, evidence. English only is working. Furthermore, I had a more conservative article that said, look, there's schools doing bilingual education and it just isn't working. English would be better. English would serve the students better. And then a lot of more liberal pieces that were trying to say bilingual is what students need support in this language. The ultimate playing card, if you erase the language, you're erasing the culture, and what is that doing to students? So it kind of felt like theoretically bilingual would be better, but the evidence that was presented widely suggested that English-only education would be better. I'm not really sure where that puts me as a teacher. I'm hoping, especially with my Latino students, that I can use my Spanish to help them. What it did demonstrate, though, was a serious hegemony of what is acceptable in this country and this ideology that if you're going to be successful in America, you have to speak English. Your Spanish is not only going to make you fail, it's a detriment to your learning. If you can't speak English, then you're stupid. Like that was the attitude the whole way through. And that's so pervasive. And that's such an internalized dominance for English speakers. And in fact, usually when they talked about kind of the pluses or minuses of bilingual education, it wasn't so much about the kid, it was about the English speaking teacher and what's going to make your classroom better, not this person's education. So even in this topic that should be all about these students, what we care most about is the dominant language and the dominant culture. And these Latinos who are agreeing and saying my kid has to learn English or they can't succeed here, that shows internalized oppression, because that says my culture, my language is insufficient for my child. I have to homogenize them with a dominant culture or they won't be successful.